***3 years into the relationship with Clement ***. In the third year of dating Clement, he began to think about breaking up. One night, after drinking, he complained to his friends, "Amelia is like a bowl of plain kidney. I'm really sick of it, but I don't want to be the bad guy. I need a good reason to end things with her." Someone suggested, "The newly returned prince, Giles, can have any woman he wants. Besides, Amelia's face is just his type." Clement shook his head firmly. "Amelia is too well behaved. She wouldn't like someone like him." Later, I watched as Clement saw me obediently allow Giles to kiss me. He felt as though he had a bone stuck in his throat, consumed by jealousy to the point of madness. Soon after, he desperately sought reconciliation. "Amelia, after 3 years together, can you really let go?" That night, Giles forcefully pressed me against the floor-to-ceiling window. "Amelia, so what if it's been 3 years? Can he treat you like I do?" In the third year with Clement, just like any other girl in a serious relationship, I started to think about settling into a stable marriage. On our anniversary, I had prepared matching rings, but in the end, I never had the chance to present them. During the party that night, I stepped outside to take a phone call, and accidentally overheard his conversation with friends. "Amelia is great and well behaved, but I'm just not interested anymore. She's like a bowl of plain kidney. You know, it's warm and comforting but bland. I've had enough after 3 years. I recently met a girl who's lively, bold, and has a great figure. I'm really a bit infatuated. Are you serious about breaking up?" Clement, smoking a cigarette, replied with a laugh, "Yes, I'm serious. All I can think about now is that temptress." He sighed, feeling both helpless and irritated, "But I can't pinpoint anything wrong with Amelia. I don't want to be the bad guy, and I don't have a good reason to break up with her." I stood behind a tall plant, watching the man I had loved for 3 years. He furrowed his brow, his eyes full of distress. 3 years ago, he had tried desperately to win me over. 3 years later, he was trying to figure out how to break up with me, with a clear conscience. In my vision, Clement's face suddenly became blurred. On a palm-sized green leaf, a glistening water droplet rolled off. I raised my hand to touch my face, and realized I had been crying. As I turned to leave, I suddenly heard a friend of Clement's speak up. "I have an idea. I heard Giles just returned from abroad. This prince is such a playboy. There's no woman he can't have." Clement's face suddenly darkened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if Giles manages to get her, you'll have a legitimate reason to break up with her. Giles always has high standards. Why would he be interested in her?" Clement's voice was cold. "I heard that our esteemed young master has a thing for this type. Over the years, he's had a dozen or so girlfriends, all demure and delicate, like playing a matching game. Amelia's face is exactly his type." Clement shook his head firmly. "Amelia is too well behaved, too rigid. She wouldn't like this type, so even if Giles likes her, it won't make a difference." "Well, it's worth a try." The friend chuckled. "What if it works? You'd be rid of this problem. Besides, if the prince steals your girl, he owes you a favor. Such a chance is hard to come by." Clement slowly lowered his gaze and said nothing more. "By the way, the prince is also dining here tonight. Want to give it a shot?" I stared at Clement's face, unwavering. After about 10 seconds, he gently nodded, and in that moment, the last shred of attachment I had for him suddenly vanished. When the party ended, Clement said he had drunk too much, and wanted me to accompany him for a walk in the garden. I didn't refuse. As we went outside, he accidentally spilled a drink, staining my dress. He took me to the lounge to change into a new one. It was white and very innocent looking. "You look better with your hair down." Clement suddenly reached up and removed my hairpin. My long hair fell around my waist, glossy like satin. In his slightly reddened eyes, there was a fleeting softness. Yet he still spoke. "Let's go." The garden was large, and in the spring night, the occasional chirping of insects made it even more peaceful. "Amelia, wait here a moment. I need to make a phone call." I nodded, still not refusing. Clement took his phone and left but didn't return for a while. A drunken man came over, smoking, and started hitting on me. I couldn't evade in time, and the neckline of my dress was nearly torn. In a panic, I screamed. From behind a nearby plant, footsteps approached quickly. Several tall, Burly bodyguards in black quickly kicked the drunkard to the ground. Then I saw the rumored Giles. He stood in the lingering night, his fingers flickering with faint sparks. The ground lights were dim, making his face shadowy and indistinct. I could only see his tall, lean figure. Embarrassed, I clutched at my neckline, my long hair falling messily over my chest. The spring night breeze was soft, making my dress flutter and brush against my calves. The itch was almost unbearable. I couldn't help but bend over to brush it away. When my broken heel made me nearly fall, a strong hand suddenly steadied my arm. Then, a suit jacket with a faint scent of smoke and a deep, aquatic fragrance was draped over my shoulders, covering my exposed shoulder. On the west side of the garden, a gazebo was situated on a slightly elevated spot. Clement and his friends stood below the gazebo. Everything in the garden was visible from there. He saw guileless bodyguards rescuing Amelia. He saw Giles supporting Amelia, and draping his coat over her. Everything was as his friend had said. When Giles saw Amelia for the first time, his gaze never left her face. Clement was initially pleased, but as Amelia maintained her unguarded attitude, he felt an indescribable discomfort. Amelia was timid and obedient, although Clement was tired of her blandness. Deep down, he still wished she were only obedient and sweet to him. As the night grew deeper, he watched Giles' assistant bring new shoes. He watched as they talked and Amelia occasionally smiled. Her dimples appeared now and then, both sweet and charming. He didn't realize when he had put out his cigarette, but found himself somewhat dazed. When Amelia obediently followed Giles away, he suddenly lost composure. Gripping a half-burnt cigarette, his palm burned painfully. Clement hurriedly let go of the cigarette, but, when he looked up again, the garden was empty, with no one left. It was only when I got into Giles' car that I realized something was wrong with my body. It must have been the last drink Clement gave me. Something unclean was added to it. I knew he was despicable, but I hadn't expected him to be this vile. After 3 years together, with both families having met, everyone thought we were about to get married. But now, he had personally pushed me into another man's arms just to break up with me without any burden. The effects of the drug intensified. As the car jolted, my leg brushed against Giles' knee. My body was burning, almost unable to sit upright. He looked at me. Amelia, what's wrong? My mind was growing hazy. I barely heard him call my full name. My throat was parched, and my voice came out hoarse and weak. Giles. I wanted to ask him to take me to the hospital, but when his hand gripped my forearm, the last shred of rationality I had suddenly snapped. Why are you so hot? Giles furrowed his attractive brows, placing his palm on my forehead. His body was slightly cooler than mine. As his hand touched me, I sighed in relief. The cigarette smell faded, replaced by the faint aquatic fragrance. I grabbed his fingers, pressing them against my burning face. So comfortable. Giles instructed the driver to turn the car around and lowered the partition. The back seat was spacious but private. He finally let down his guard. Pulling away, he held my waist. My body was lifted slightly and then quickly brought back down. My white dress was tangled around his waist, like a half-open flower. Giles raised his hand, rubbing his fingertips over my burning, slightly swollen lips. His eyes held a flirtatious desire, and he spoke in a low, seductive tone. Amelia, HMM. I looked at him, confused, yet, uncontrollably. I opened my mouth and bit his slender fingers. The cool touch only momentarily eased the internal heat. Do you want to feel even better? His other hand moved to my lower back, pressing close. As his words finished, his hand applied slight pressure. My body tilted forward into his embrace. Do you want to feel even better? I nodded in a daze. Giles' hand gripped the back of my head, pulling me closer. He lowered his head, prying my lips open for a deep kiss. It felt as though the entire world was spinning around me. Everything was enveloped in the scorching heat of the night. My fingers were tightly gripping Giles' sleeve. The grip was so tight my fingertips turned white. Yet I still couldn't control myself, and let out a soft moan. Is this so comfortable? He chuckled softly and lightly bit my lower lip. His large hand, resting on my lower back, pressed me even more firmly against his solid abdomen. Giles kissed me again, sealing that soft moan. Otherwise, I won't be able to resist. Just as he finished speaking, my phone suddenly rang, and vibrated. Giles slowly took out the phone from his bag. On the screen, Clement's name was flashing repeatedly. He smirked, the emotion in his eyes, a mix of restraint and madness. Amelia, it's your boyfriend's call. Should I answer it? The blaring ringtone seemed to pull me back to some semblance of sanity. I shook my head vigorously, tears welling at the corners of my eyes. No, Giles, don't answer it. It's fine if I don't answer. He put the phone down and leaned back against the car seat. Amelia, come here and kiss me. Open your mouth. Don't bite. He grimaced in pain as his fingers fumbled with the strap of my dress. In the dim, shifting light, only that patch of snow-white skin appeared intermittently. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly, and when he spoke again, his voice was already husky. Amelia, you've grown up. I didn't quite understand what Giles meant by that. I'm 24 years old. I've long grown up. The car stopped, but we were in front of Giles' villa. The driver had discreetly kept his distance. Giles wrapped me in his suit jacket and carried me out of the car. The heat on my body was unbearable, and I tried to pull off the jacket, but he restrained my restless hands. Bear with it, a little longer. We haven't even reached the room yet. I shook my head wildly, my hot fingers undoing the buttons of his shirt and the hem. My hands, burning with heat, pressed against his cool, muscular abdomen. The heat of my palms met the coolness of his muscles, and soon, my burning face was pressed against him as well. Even my breath felt scalding as it spilled onto his chest. Giles' steps faltered slightly. He looked down at me, a trace of helplessness in his eyes. After a moment, he held my wandering hands again and quickened his pace. Amelia, this is your own doing. Get a grip and stop crying. Don't blame me. The phone left in the car started ringing insistently again, but no one paid it any mind. Clement's face was dark with cold anger. He had lost count of how many times he had called Amelia. He had sent countless texts, all of which had sunk without a trace. The night was deep, yet he couldn't sleep. Everything had been going smoothly. Maybe by tomorrow, he could rid himself of Amelia without a second thought. But his mind couldn't shake off the image of Amelia smiling up at Giles. He felt a pang of regret. Perhaps he shouldn't have let his emotions run wild, and followed his friend's advice to drug that glass of juice. Even if Amelia was just a bowl of bland porridge, he was thoroughly sick of it. Yet he couldn't accept that this bowl of porridge was suddenly being held by another man. Maybe it was just a ridiculous possessiveness. Maybe it was because they had been together for 3 years, and because he had once truly liked and loved her. That's why he felt this sense of unwillingness. The phone rang suddenly. Clement reflexively answered it quickly, but it wasn't Amelia calling. How's it going? Did it work out? Are you happy? His friend's voice came through with some smugness, but Clement found it grating. I took some pictures of them in the garden just now, and of Amelia getting into the prince's car. They're very clear. Tomorrow, you can use these photos to break up with her. She won't have much to say. Clement abruptly interrupted his friend. Is Amelia with Giles right now? No, no, I made sure of it. His friend laughed. Even though our prince is quite the womanizer, he still does things properly. Knowing Amelia is your girlfriend, he just sent her home. Clement hung up the phone, grabbed the car keys, and headed outside, but the door suddenly opened, revealing a heavily made-up face. Clement, I've been waiting for you for a while. The girl's voice was particularly delicate and seductive, a stark contrast to Amelia. His heart was tugged with discomfort, knowing that Amelia had already gone home. He had no more worries. He had wanted to break up with her anyway. Now, if he saw her and ended up softening, it would be a loss. He had already come this far. Clement gritted his teeth. The young, fiery girl rushed over and tightly embraced him. Clement, why aren't you speaking? He looked down at the bold young girl. The plain Amelia was quickly forgotten. He pinched the girl's chin and kissed her deeply. Shall we go to my place tonight? Are you not afraid your girlfriend will find out? Clement chuckled. What girlfriend? You're my girlfriend. How annoying. I haven't agreed to you yet. Whether you agree or not, your words don't count. Clement didn't waste time with her and directly threw her onto the sofa. The girl screamed in shock, clinging tightly to his neck. Clement knelt beside her, unfastening his belt. As he leaned down again, the girl's face in front of him suddenly seemed to turn into Amelia's. Clement stared blankly, furrowing his brow. He stood up, flipped the girl around so she was facing away from him, and leaned down once more. When Giles carried me to the bathtub, my dress was already in disarray. As I entered the water, I had a brief moment of clarity, but soon, the warm water sliding over my burning skin became scorching hot. My back pressed against Skyla's solid body. Giles looked down and kissed the side of my face gently. On the shelf, the phone was recording. I was completely unaware. He didn't act with much lewdness. Even his kisses were restrained and fleeting, but it only made me feel more tormented. Unable to resist, I raised my arms and clung to his neck, wanting him to kiss me deeper, but Giles simply stopped. He grasped my wrists and pulled me away. I looked at him in confusion and distress. Giles. Giles leaned back in the bathtub, smiling with a wicked and cruel look. Amelia, you need to be clear about what you want. The water in the bathtub rippled slightly. The soaked dress clung to my slender but curvaceous body. With my ragged breathing, it also rippled. Giles, shirtless, exposed large patches of honey-colored skin and well-defined muscles. I couldn't help but want to touch him, but as soon as I reached out, he pressed my hand down. Amelia, it's getting late. He made as if to stand up. I couldn't resist, clinging tightly to him. Giles, I want you. What do you want me for? I want you to kiss me like you did in the car. Who am I? You're Giles. Giles. Giles gently lifted my chin. Amelia, look clearly and say it properly. I see clearly. You're Giles. You're Giles. Good. Now say again. What do you want? I cried softly, unable to bear it. With my eyes closed, I kissed his chin randomly. I want Giles. I want Giles. What do you want Giles for? I want Giles to kiss me like in the car. He finally lowered his head and kissed me with heavy force. The bothersome fabric was finally all torn away. The next second, I was directly lifted out of the bathtub by him. In front of the large, pristine mirror in the bathroom, I saw my own face clearly. The faint makeup was almost gone, but my face looked even more stunning than with the brightest blush. My eyes were filled with a glossy, watery sheen. Just as he had lifted me from the bathtub, my whole body was even wetter than when I was in it. Giles kissed the side of my neck. Amelia, he lightly bit my earlobe. Why so thin? Didn't you eat well? Giles, I raised my face in discomfort, glaring at him through the mirror. You talk too much. The next day when I woke up, I felt like I had been run over by a heavy truck. Every inch of my body ached and was sore. The blackout curtains were tightly drawn, letting no light in. My mind was still not fully clear, and I couldn't tell what day it was. I forced myself to sit up, and discovered that I was completely naked. My mind seemed to explode in an instant. Fragments of memory came rushing back intermittently. I sat on the bed, stunned as if struck by lightning. So, I slept with Giles last night. The room was empty. From the furnishings and layout, it seemed to be Giles' bedroom. I didn't know how to face this absurdity. I just wanted to leave this unfamiliar place as quickly as possible. When I quickly finished my shower, I saw my dress was already washed and dried. I put it on in a rush, grabbed my phone and bag, and left the bedroom. I didn't see Giles downstairs. When a servant in the living room saw me, they immediately smiled and said, Miss Amelia, you're awake. There's food prepared in the kitchen. No, thank you. I kept walking toward the door. The servant followed. Miss Amelia, are you looking for Giles? Giles got up late today. He's out running, and hasn't come back yet. No, I'm not looking for him. I stopped, feeling awkward and not daring to look the servant in the eye. I'm leaving now. You can go back to your work. There's no need to follow me. Miss Amelia, the master instructed that you should let him know as soon as you wake up. No need. I quickly stopped the servant. I need to go home and take care of something. Don't disturb him. Then let the driver take you. No, I've called a cab. I didn't want to run into Giles and briefly dismiss the servant before hurrying out. But before I could reach the front door, Giles came back from his run. He was wearing sportswear, and his muscle lines were particularly striking. I glanced at him and quickly looked away. There were several clear scratch marks on his muscular forearm. They looked fresh, likely from me last night. Where are you going? Giles took the clean towel the servant handed him. As he wiped his sweat, he asked, Going home. Wait a moment, I'll shower and then take you. It's not necessary. I've called a cab, and it should arrive soon. This is a private residence, and outside cabs can't come in. You'd have to walk at least a kilometer. Are you sure you have the energy? Giles raised an eyebrow, his eyes carrying a hint of playfulness. I bit my lip, clutching my skirt. My legs felt weak, my body still ached, and my lower abdomen was a bit uncomfortable. The shoes were still the high heels he had brought to match the dress last night. I knew how uncomfortable it would be to walk a kilometer. I'll take you. Giles came over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. You should eat something first, otherwise, your stomach will feel bad. I looked at him in surprise. Giles didn't say anything more, just took my hand and led me back. I ate in the dining room while Giles went upstairs to shower. To my surprise, his taste was almost identical to mine. The prepared food was all to my liking. Before I knew it, I had finished all the food on my plate. When Giles came down dressed in casual clothes after his shower, even though it was just a simple shirt and trousers, he still carried an air of charm. He glanced at the empty plate in front of me, and a faint smile appeared in his eyes. Are you full? I felt a bit embarrassed. Yes. The food was very delicious. Giles seemed to be in a good mood. With a wave of his hand, he doubled the wages of every servant in the kitchen. Everyone was overjoyed. The prince was indeed lavish, spending money like water. When we reached my apartment building, Giles asked the driver to get out first. I looked at him in confusion. I need to tell you something. What is it? I asked nervously. Giles was completely different from Clement. Although Clement's family was wealthy, they didn't belong to Giles' social circle, and although Giles had been abroad for a few years, I often heard his name. His background and family were jaw-droppingly impressive. His private life was colorful and varied, although rumors were often exaggerated. There's no smoke without fire, and there was some truth to it. It was said that during his years studying abroad, he had quite a wild life, and had even caused a fatal incident. But with Giles' background, such matters could be easily handled. Still, I was afraid of dealing with such a person. Even though Giles had always been a gentleman and kind since we first interacted last night, he still presented a challenge. He didn't answer, only taking out his phone and playing a recording. After hearing just one sentence, my face turned crimson. I instinctively covered my ears. Giles quickly turned it off, but I still felt extremely embarrassed. My mind was filled with my own voice saying, I want Giles. I want you to kiss me like you did in the car. I never knew my voice could sound so soft. Giles, can you delete these recordings? I looked at him carefully. Giles smiled. Of course, Amelia. The purpose of the recording wasn't to blackmail you. Then what was it for? To make sure you don't deny it later. To avoid you thinking I was deliberately bullying you. Deny it? Yes. I spent an entire night making the antidote for you. He looked at me calmly. I can't have done it for nothing. I'm sorry. I was so embarrassed I felt like crying. Don't apologize. Just take responsibility. Take responsibility. Yes, take responsibility. But what? I was completely confused. How am I supposed to take responsibility? Marriage, Giles. I gasped, calling out his name in shock. Giles leaned back in his seat, smiling. His smile was indeed charming. It made one's heart flutter, yet sounded alarm bells. A man like him was definitely not someone to get involved with, especially someone like me, who couldn't keep up with him. What? Now that my purity is gone, you don't want to take responsibility? I widened my eyes in disbelief, but Giles looked serious. Think it over carefully. Giles, does it have to be this way? I bit my lip tightly. Last night, you enjoyed it too. Let's call it even. How is that even? Giles' smile deepened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Amelia, you tell me, can it be considered even? I lowered my head, feeling both embarrassed and scared. Tears finally started to fall, one by one. He was right. How can I even things out with him? It was his first time, but not mine. What are you crying for? Giles roughly pinched my chin and wiped away my tears. If you really don't want to, I won't force you. I'm sorry. I truly felt sorry. Clement had schemed against him, and last night, I acted out of spite and revenge, taking advantage of the situation. I also used him, but I didn't expect there was something dirty in the juice. And now, This is how things turned out. Amelia, let's compromise. Compromise how? If you don't want to get married, then just be my girlfriend. Giles wiped away my tears again. So many tears. No wonder last night. I covered his mouth with my hand. Giles, don't say that. What's there to be shy about? Isn't it you who kept me from leaving? Giles. I tried to cover his mouth again, but Giles grabbed my wrist and kissed me. How about this? It's more effective. When we got out of the car, I almost stumbled, my legs weak, but Giles caught me just in time. Even after we got home, the heat on my face hadn't faded. Things had completely derailed. In just 2 days, my life had taken such a sudden turn. When Clement called, I still didn't want to answer, but I knew very clearly, the 3 years of relationship between us had ended completely last night. He sent me several WeChat messages. They were photos. Photos of me talking with Giles in the garden last night, and of me leaving with him. Amelia, do you owe me an explanation? I found it quite amusing. If I hadn't heard their conversation last night, seeing these photos might have made me feel extremely ashamed. Sometimes I really don't understand. Why can't men just calmly say they want to break up? Where do they get the confidence that women will obsess over them and cling to them? I might be sad, but it's just about 3 years of a relationship ending without a good outcome. I took the relationship seriously, but it didn't turn out well, from start to finish. I have no regrets. Clement, let's break up. Let's handle it separately with our parents. Don't contact me again. After sending the message, I didn't wait for his reply. I deleted and blocked all his contact information. I tried searching for Giles online, and talked with my best friend. She had heard some rumors about Giles and was quite worried for me. Amelia, I have a friend studying abroad. She mentioned that he had caused a death. Giles' family has been worried about his marriage for years. His romantic history is too complicated. He's fickle and unreliable. The wealthy young ladies don't want to marry someone like him who might bring hardship. I'm a bit worried, afraid he might bully you, or make you suffer. Bullied, made to suffer. I felt a bit dazed. In the month I've known him, Giles didn't seem as bad as the rumors said, just a bit, or rather, 2 things. He liked to tease me, and was unsatisfied in bed. My best friend and I have known each other since kindergarten. We're really close, closer than sisters. I didn't want her to worry, so I quietly shared these things with her. But as soon as I finished, she went wild. Amelia, how can you eat so well behind my back? Do you know the guy I broke up with 3 months ago was only this big? She cried as she took out her MAC lipstick. How could you complain about your sizes being mismatched? I'm serious. Think about it. Giles is almost 1.9 meters tall, and I'm just over 1.6 meters. My best friend wouldn't listen. My ex was also 188 centimeters, a big tree with a small chili pepper. It's unfair. I could only comfort her. Being too big isn't good either. It can really hurt. I'm willing to endure the pain. My best friend glared at me. You drive me crazy. Amelia, I'm so jealous. I couldn't help but laugh and cry at the same time. It seemed like the last bit of shadow in my heart was completely dispelled in this laughter. That evening, Giles came to pick me up for dinner. I thought it was just an ordinary date, but I didn't expect we were going to meet his closest friends. I was a bit puzzled. It's said that every relationship Giles has had was short-lived. I didn't think I would be any different. If that's the case, what's the point of meeting his friends? We had to walk through a small garden to reach the dining building. I didn't say much on the way. My feelings were too complex to express. Not happy. Giles suddenly stopped. Don't want to meet them, do you? I shook my head but nodded at the same time. I don't know them, and I don't understand politics or finance. When Giles was studying abroad, he made his first fortune in hedge funds. Most of his friends now are elites in the financial world. And I'm just an ordinary college graduate. A month's salary doesn't even cover their dinner. It's just dinner. We'll leave right after, Giles said, but then suddenly grabbed my wrist and pulled me in front of him. Amelia, he looked down at me. Give me a kiss. Hey. We haven't seen each other for a day. Give me a kiss. Giles' fingers pinched my chin, his voice low but gentle. I glanced around instinctively. It was dim and there was no one around. I then stood on tiptoe and gave him a light kiss. But as we pulled away, Giles suddenly took control. He held the back of my head, and deepened the kiss forcefully. He only released me when we were almost out of breath. His eyes, which usually looked flirtatious when he smiled, now seemed to contain tender affection. He wiped the moisture from my lips, and took my hand again. Let's go. It's time to go in. As he turned around, he glanced casually at a certain spot, the corners of his lips twitching slightly. Who is scheming against whom? If he wasn't willing, Clement's plan wouldn't have gone so smoothly. The early summer breeze already had a hint of heat, but Clement, standing under the tree, felt a chill all over. A friend said Giles likes girls like Amelia, so once he met her, he wouldn't let go. But Clement had always been sure in his heart that a girl like Amelia would never fall for a playboy. But he never expected Amelia would obediently tilt her face up to kiss another man. She used to kiss him like that. At first, he really liked her gentle and shy demeanor, but later, he became weary. He was captivated by those bold and avant-garde girls. He completely forgot how he was moved by her in the beginning. Clement couldn't describe how he felt now. He felt like a thorn in his throat, almost driven to madness. He never knew he could be so jealous. Jealous to the point of almost spitting blood. But he didn't even have the right to question. After all, it was he who made all this happen. He was the one who sent Amelia to Giles. He couldn't blame anyone else. The dinner was not as boring as I imagined. Maybe it was because Giles was always considerate of my feelings. The topics discussed were light and pleasant. When I went to the restroom, one of his friend's fiancés went with me. While touching up my makeup, the lady looked at me with a smile. When are we going to have your wedding? I was taken aback. We don't have any plans to get married. No plans. How is that possible? Giles told us himself. About what? That he's getting married this year. I laughed. Maybe he's marrying someone else. Don't be ridiculous. You're his girlfriend. Of course, he's marrying you. Doesn't he usually not keep a girlfriend for more than a month? The lady looked at me like I was an alien. Who told you that? Giles only had one girlfriend in middle school, who he never even held hands with. I tightened my grip on the lipstick. Didn't he have many relationships while studying abroad? Many people pursued him, but he's very heartless. To girls he doesn't like, he's extremely ruthless, so his reputation isn't great. I instinctively pressed my lips together and asked the question I wanted to ask the most. Then did he really cause a death abroad? Yes, a girl committed suicide because of him, but he couldn't save her. But I think he's really innocent. He just rejected someone he didn't like. Why not clarify? Giles' family has numerous media outlets and entertainment companies. Clarifying such matters isn't hard. I don't know. We're puzzled too. But he doesn't want to clarify. So the rumors keep getting more outrageous. The lady laughed helplessly. Actually, his private life is quite boring. He's dull by nature. He doesn't engage in the things we play with. The lady then joked. Is it also quite dull, being with him? Not really. And he didn't seem to be a boring person. He liked to tease people. But when he upset someone, he was good at comforting them. Thinking of how he comforted me yesterday, my face suddenly turned red again. Giles really seems to be completely different from what people say. And it seems I never disliked him from the beginning. In the second month after the breakup, Clement suddenly visited my parents' house. I was very surprised when I received the call to come home. He came to discuss marriage with my parents. I was truly infuriated, and laughed in anger. I threw away all the valuable gifts he brought. Clement, you went to great lengths to break up, and now you're doing this again. I have always been a gentle person. It was the first time I was so angry. Even my parents were frightened. Amelia, what's going on? Let's talk this out. I asked my parents to go back to their room and, after calming down, spoke. Clement, stop disturbing my life. I heard everything you and he said that night. Clement panicked immediately. Amelia, I admit I was crazy at the time, but now I regret it. I really regret it. It's too late. I laughed softly. You should have thought about the consequences when you put something in my juice. But he sent you home that night, didn't he? No, I was at Giles' place that night. We spent the whole night together, and everything happened. Clement refused to believe it, shaking his head. I don't believe it. It's impossible. Isn't this the result you wanted? Congratulations, Clement. You got what you wanted. Clement's eyes were red and frightening. He stepped forward and tightly grabbed my arm. Amelia, our 3-year relationship is different. When you said those things, I had already moved on. I pushed him away, my voice calm and cold. It's impossible. We were together for 3 years. You wouldn't let go so easily. Please leave my house. If you come again, I will call the police immediately. Amelia. Clement wanted to say something more, but I pushed him out the door and locked it. After comforting my parents, I was about to leave. Giles was already downstairs. Noticing my bad mood, he took me to a very quiet bar. After we drank to a slight intoxication, Giles took me home. On the way home, he lowered the partition and gently asked, "What did Clement want when he came to your house today?" I snuggled in his arms, mumbling, "He came to propose." Propose? Yeah, I kicked him out. He also said something about our 3-year relationship, and how I couldn't let go. Giles didn't speak, only gently caress my face. He didn't want to admit it, but he was truly jealous. Jealous of Amelia and Clement's 3 years. Those 3 years were genuine love, so no one could interfere. But now, he could only feel relieved. Amelia. Giles carried me into the bedroom, pressing me against the floor-to-ceiling window. Unlike his usual gentle demeanor, he was unusually harsh this time. His hot palm rested on my lower abdomen. Giles kissed my earlobe. Amelia, what about our 3-year relationship? Does he treat you like this? I shook my head in discomfort, tears breaking apart. I cried, my fingers digging into his strong muscles. Giles, I'm scared. I was truly scared. Never having felt this way before, I felt like I was going to die. He lowered his head and kissed away my tears. Amelia, marry me. Why? Because I like you. Like me? Yes, I've liked you for a long time. Giles smiled with his usual charm. It's just that at that time, you were someone else's girlfriend. Can you leave first? Promise me and I'll go. If you leave, I'll promise. Amelia. Giles seemed to be laughing in anger. He lowered his head and gave me a light bite. If you don't promise, I'll stay right here. But your family, Giles' family is not like ours. Their marriage matters can't be handled recklessly. They've already agreed. What did you say? Do you think all those rumors over the years about me being a playboy, and causing a death spread by themselves? Giles smiled. He always acted this way, focusing solely on achieving his goals without considering the process or methods. He fell in love with Amelia at first sight. Even when he learned she had a boyfriend, he thought of giving up. But he obsessively spied on everything about her. The more he spied, the harder it was to let go. Some loves are just irrational. The right person, everything about that person fits perfectly with your tastes. Even if Clement didn't initially intend to break up, he would have found another opportunity to steal his love away. As for Giles' family, he had been planning today for a long time, knowing that family background is an insurmountable obstacle. So he had to remove these worries. That's how Chinese people handle things. When you threaten to demolish a house, they'll try their best to stop you. But if you step back and say you only want to open a window, they'll gladly agree. So, he wants to marry a girl from an ordinary family. To the elders, it's better than being a playboy who causes a death and is unwilling to marry, with a bad reputation. Amelia, you're the only one I've dated. You have to be responsible for me. Giles picked me up. You're the best and most obedient girl. You won't be unfaithful, will you? I suddenly found the term unfaithful amusing, and at that moment, I inexplicably nodded. Giles carried me back to the bed, kissing the dimples on my cheek. Since you promised, I'll go out. But I raised my hand and hugged him tightly. Giles, just take it slow. I rested my face on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I thought about the night in the garden when we first met. He draped his suit over me. At that time, who would have thought we'd end up here today? Amelia, close your eyes. I obediently closed my eyes. Suddenly, I felt a cool ring slip onto my finger. I opened my eyes to see a dazzling diamond on my middle finger. It sparkled in the night. Do you like it? I pursed my lips and smiled lightly, turning my face to see the blooming flowers on the terrace. Summer has arrived, and the flowers meant for me have bloomed. This story has ended. Please subscribe to the channel to stay updated with the latest content. A large number of novels are updated daily.